on that note, I'd love to introduce, I'm so honored to be sitting here virtually today with three very, very inspiring young women, all from different parts of the world. So we have GoWoon Kim from Korea. GoWoon is a researcher, a scholar, a teacher, and an activist. Her interests are in education, reform, cultural revitalization, seeing the need to revitalize much of the ancient culture of where she's from in Korea. But she can tell you more about that. And she's involved with the eco-village movement and co-parenting initiatives. And she grows her own rice. She grows all her own rice with her parents, which I just think is so amazing, as well as her vegetables. So that's GoWoon. Thais, or maybe I shouldn't introduce so much because I will do it when they speak. But just briefly, Thais, I met a couple of years ago in Ladakh, which is actually where Kunzang is from. Thais is a Master of Holistic Science from Schumacher College. She's interested in tackling climate change. She's a climate youth leader and also in reforming education. She started a project called Eco Universidad in Brazil. And sorry, my Portuguese pronunciation is probably not the best. And I'm also so honored to be here with Thais because she ran a huge event for World Localization Day in Brazil just this last week. So thank you so much for all you're doing. And lastly, Kunzang is a good friend and someone who I work with in Ladakh. She recently started work, or not so recently anymore, a couple of years, has been working with local futures in Ladakh, particularly to strengthen the young farmers movement that is emerging there at the grassroots. So thank you all so much for coming, and we'll pass to GoWoon first to start us off.
Okay, it's very honored to be on the show today. And my name is GoWoon, and I also go by Agnes. Feel free to call me GoWoon or Agnes. And you know, in Korea, we have a saying that a picture is worth 8,000 words. So I actually prepared a couple of pictures to show you my stories. So if you can allow me to share the,
Yes.
Yeah, please.
It should be now. Yeah, you're a co-host.
Thanks, Laura. That's my colleague Laura from the UK.
Thank you, Laura.
As well.
Okay, so can you guys see my PPT slides? Yes. Yeah. So
yes.
Okay, so I will present as it is now. So my name is GoWoon, and as Henry introduced, my research area includes community resilience, traditional ecological knowledge of Korea, and I'm very interested in finding some methods to actually maintain the sustainability of social find the mechanisms of sustainability of socio-ecological systems at local level in Korea. And my personal interest also involves community building and local sustainability, and that's why I'm here. And I'm also a mother of two complex beings, two sons, and I'm expecting third one this winter. And I want to introduce three areas of my life: research, my family, and my community activities. So my research actually is very centered on this concept, which I have coined in my dissertation. It's called socio-ecological memory. And I try to go to, rural areas of Korea and listen to people and listen to what they practice at certain points and at which place. So together with their stories about themselves and practice and place, I thought this may build their certain social ecological memory that can bring their strong bond for local community stewardship. So this concept is what I'm trying to, convey through my research. And because I used to study landscape ecology, I'm an ecologist as well. So I'm very interested in finding some traditional ecological landscape element of traditional community. And one interesting element that I found is village growth. So traditionally, a Korean village was built within a valley or within a watershed to have an easier access to water and wood and etc. And people built village growth to retain their resources. And it also has some religious functions as well. So people were banned to cut any living things within that trees, village groups. So many of these village groups are still sustained and maintained in Korea. And there are certain types of village groups, but mainly the main function or mechanism is to give the community a sense of community and to help them retain natural resources within the village landscape. So that's one interesting topic that I'd like to introduce. And second interesting landscape element is called Kunzang in Korea. It's a traditional irrigation system. So if you have a rice paddy field, and if you have not enough water, like in Korea, we have intense rainfall in summer, whereas we get less rainwater in spring, which makes the rice cropping very hard, difficult. So what traditionally people made is a small pond besides their rice paddy fields so that they can collect water from groundwater or rainwater so that they can use it in spring times. And it has now become a house of many, many living things. So it actually helps you for keep the biodiversity of the local areas. So that's one thing that I also want to introduce. And what I do with my research topic is I bring students to the field. So when I go to field trips, I don't go on my own. I bring my colleagues or students so that they can actually have communication or dialogues with people, old people in that community, villagers. And when younger people visit the rural villages, these grandmothers and grandfathers are just too happy because, there's not enough young people in these days in rural areas, right? So they just talk and talk and talk. And we have these meaningful stories and, how they sustained in earlier their lives and, the clues to local sustainability through their, mouth so easily. So, and through our couple of research, what I found is this kind of education actually helps students to build not only intercommunication skills, but also intra-communication skills. So students get to know each other on their field trips, and they also, have this opportunity to understand different perspectives by having discussions with their peers in a remote area. So that's pretty much about my work, research work. And this is about my family life. So last year, COVID-19 also broke every life of Korea as well. Everything was stopped. But when my parents heard that everything is going to be closed and stopped, what they decided is to move permanently to a remote countryside so that we can totally become self-sufficient. So thanks to my, brave, such brave parents, we became, within a year, last year, we became totally self-sufficient in terms of food. So we grow our rice, we grow our own cabbage to make our own kimchi. Like you can see, we have our own chickens and vegetables. It's amazing, and it's just you need to feel on your own to be, how it is, how it would feel like to become self-sufficient. You finally feel like you are a living, being. So that's pretty much about my family life. And I spend maybe 3 days on the remote area to help my parents with my kids to farm. And the third thing that I want to introduce is about my community involvement. So in Yungin, the place where I live now, we are organizing a parent cooperative daycare center. So 20 family groups gathered together to provide safe and sustainable environments to their kids, and to provide child-centered, local culture-based curriculum, and to provide and produce local and organic food for all the family members. So this parent cooperative daycare center is organized by a group of local families with similar philosophies and hire trained teachers to provide the children with a quality childhood experience. And this daycare center is administered and maintained by the parents. It's like a non-profit co-op. So it's also supported by law, and we get some governmental fundings to run the daycare center. And once you join this daycare center as a parent, you become more interested in local sustainability activities. So even if you were not that kind of person who is interested in this pro-environmental activities and etc. But once you have a child, you become very interested in what's healthier and what's organic and what's good for their kids. But in order for your kids to grow organic, you need to be organic first. So that's why we make this organic group to help ourselves learn each other, and by learning something together in that atmosphere, kids learn naturally, right? So that's what I do with these parent cooperative initiatives. Last year, every parent has to be the member of the board of directors once before the graduation. And last year was my turn. So when my term started, the COVID-19 began. So, we are this socializing group where this communication, meeting in person and sharing, food is the core essence of the organization. We didn't know what to do with this social distancing measures and etc. And we paused. Everyone was paused, like everywhere else. But we started to ask ourselves, what would be the first thing if the world will be, stopped to teach your child? And the answer we found was seed. So we handed out these Aboriginal seeds, non-GMO seeds, to every family members. And we began to collect these photos at their home, sign of hopes and sign of sprouts. And soon later, our vegetable gardens at the daycare center became full of lives. and kids were just so happy to play there without wearing masks. And I have to make it very short, but just one sentence, last sentence I want to share with you was, it just took a seed to hope for 20 family groups and not to give up our sustainability goals last year. And that was the most important lesson that I learned last year. And I wanted to share it with you guys. That's about it. Yes.
Wow. Wow, thank you so much, GoWoon. How inspiring. And gosh, you touched on so much of import. You talked about how even though we're young people building a movement for the future, that movement can be, well, must first of all be informed by ancient traditions and informed by conversation, intergenerational conversations, the intergenerational family groups coming together, so important. And yeah, it's just very touching how similarly, how close to your values you're living. And I hope for myself, first of all, that I can get there one day, and I hope for all the other young people who are in this movement that they can also get there one day. Fantastic, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. So now I'll pass on to Thais. Thais is from Brazil, and she's also been close, as I mentioned before, sorry, repeating myself, but closely involved in the World Localization Day campaign by running a big event through her Eco Universidade in Brazil, a World Localization Day conference over 4 days. So Thais, please share your wisdoms.
Hi, everyone. For me, it's a good morning. I don't know where you are in the world, but have a good day. And thank you for joining. GoWoon, thank you so much for sharing, and also for sharing pictures, because I also agree. And in Brazil, the saying goes the same. A picture is worth 1,000 words. And it's beautiful to see how you go about education on sharing with different ages and experiences. So you get people, I imagine, from the city to come to a rural area, right? To experience from their experience from the world, right? Which is really different from people that have been conditioned to think that life in the city is the only possible way, or it's the way to show success, or it's the way to say that you are someone in life, right? That you have to leave the countryside or leave nature or leave your family traditions to make yourself successful in a big city. And this is not the story that everyone has to live, or not the story that we are advocating here, right? So it's beautiful to see all these young people exchanging their experience and learning from actual communities. And so thank you very much for sharing this work.
Thank you, Thais.
I'll tell a bit about myself so you guys can know me. I went to Schumacher College. For you guys that know Schumacher, it's a ecological minded or oriented university in the UK, where I met Helena, and she told me a lot about Ladakh. So I went with Satish to Ladakh in 2019 for the Economics of Happiness conference, where I met Henry and I got to know Ladakh and local futures a little bit closer. So this is where our relationship started. Then I came back to Brazil, and I had to do something about the movement here, right? So when the invitation came for all countries to start their own Localization Day events, me and my organization, we said it makes a lot of sense. Localization here in Brazil didn't have the name of the movement. It does exist, and it's spread around Brazil, but it didn't have a name that people could come around as a movement. So I think now we could start this year. But let me tell you a bit about Eco Universidade, which is Eco University in English. So me and my partner Carla, we started this initiative here to change the educational system in Brazil. Today we're small, but it doesn't matter, because we are advocating for something that is wanting to bring about systemic change. So eco-universidade, eco-university, is a sense that we want to change the understanding of higher education, because Brazil is a very big country, and there's a lot of inequality and social inequality, and people don't have much access to higher education, and people who are in rural areas are normally seen as ignorant, for example, because they don't have a formal education. And we want to change what a higher education means. We want to change what education means in a whole sense. We want people to know that everything can be an educational process. Every change of wisdom can be an educational process. Every time we come around by the table and we have different generations sharing, this is education. So our idea is to change the concept that you have to have a lot of money and you have to go to a formal education system to become someone who is intelligent or someone who is educated. We want everyone to know that their experiences in the world are valid, and everyone to know that we want to promote an eco-future, a future that weaves human back within nature and understands that human are part of nature. So this is what Eco-University is about. So we are a big hub of everyday people who teaches and speaks and shares their own perspectives of the world, all ecologically focused, so that we can bring about change into every generation, but basically young people, so they understand their part in the world before they get frustrated within a corporate market, for example. So we work mainly in urban areas, trying to bring this awareness to people who are living the story that we were speaking. But we bring people from different parts of the world, especially from the people that have local projects and they are connected to their communities, to show these people that have been in urban areas and are a bit disconnected, the other possibilities of living, right? Other possibilities of inhabiting this world. And when Local Futures came with World Localization Day, it just made a lot of sense for us to put this all together. So I think the World Localization Day event in Brazil was a big weaving of many different communities and projects happening all around Brazil. And as I said, Brazil is really big and really diverse, and lots of different cultures inhabit this land through process of colonizing and everything that happened within our history. So we wanted this to, and Eco-Universidade, to be somewhere where diversity and different visions of the world could coexist in harmony and could speak in the same table and could have their space. So we invited people from deep in the Amazon that work with, for example, local fashion, getting rubber out of the trees with local communities, and making sustainable flip-flops, for example. We got people from cotton that are growing organic cotton. We got artists. We are working on favela with making films, activist films of showing their reality within favelas. Favelas are these communities that are in the outskirts of big cities and are invisible and people don't look at them. And mainly from the people who are part of this colonial system here still in Brazil, that works as maids or other type of jobs that don't get recognized for their work. We got artists. So we did this event by having different areas, so like fashion, education. We got an indigenous teacher who is advocating for indigenous culture and ways of living to be within the educational system of Brazil, because our educational system here is very based on European ideas and not about our own cultural ideas, our history, and showing the different points of views and cultures that there is in Brazil. It's mainly an European-based education, and we all want to change that. But he is there within. He's a Edson Cayapo is his name, and he's a professor scholar that's wanting to bring indigenous culture to higher education. So he was there as well, And so many other amazing people who are creating, for example, platforms where people from the city can buy from local producers and not go to the supermarkets anymore or to shopping centers anymore, and break this way of thinking that you need to consume, and connecting people to the local producer. We had people that are working with solar energy within favelas and making solar communities. So it was, I'm just getting all these examples, showing all these examples to you to show that these projects, they are already there, and the young people in Brazil are already showing that they want this ecological future and local future, locally based and deeply weaved within territory to exist. And they came together within a movement that we called localization. But localization for me is this expression, right, of this people, not only young, but here we are in the young people panel, but all these people who are in their territories and they fell in love with their places, and they just want to make them better and better every day, and they do want to engage their communities and live sustainably so that their places can thrive even more throughout these years. So I have seen in Brazil that in rural areas, people are very connected to place and nature. And in urban areas, people are very connected to climate change. So I've seen in urban areas, lots of climate change groups speaking and coming about, bringing awareness of everything that's happening and trying to change people's perspective and worldviews. And in rural areas, people are connecting to nature and understanding how they can show that their way of living is just as amazing as other ways of living, and they don't have to be invisible within society, because propaganda and the media and all these things makes going to bars or cinemas or theaters and all this entertainment of the big city and promises of work and money and capitalism bring people from all parts of Brazil to the south, where the financial cities are, such as the city I'm in, which is called São Paulo. And they just move away from their families and move away from their traditional cultures and everything and nature itself to inhabit a big city. And I believe that these local movements are showing that locally in your area, it has a lot of value. It has lots of movements coming. It has lots of young people going back, especially in COVID, going back to their homes and seeing that the city, without all these entertainments, with restaurants closed and with clubs closed and all these things that modernity brings us to distract us from what really matters, that the local movements are super strong and they're community based and they're heart based, and there's so much love and truth. That's what I think. There's lots of truth. So people are going back and are stewarding these movements, and it was beautiful to see everyone come together in this digital environment, because I have my thoughts on technology, that it's not going to save us all, but there are some technologies that can connect us in our own places. So this is what happened. We had people from all over Brazil speak of their realities, speak of their projects, show what they're doing, and sharing with other people from the world. And we managed to get a spark of movement going on, and people understanding what localization is, and having something to connect themselves. So someone that was in the Amazon doing this local work, and someone who was in the South doing this local work, they didn't know about each other, and now they know, and they're gaining forces, and they understand that they're not alone, and that they can speak to each other, and they can be strong together. So I think this is what was beautiful, and I think this is education as well. Sharing experiences and coming together around change, and just showing your being, what you are, and putting out your projects, and showing what you believe in, and sharing this knowledge with other people. I think this is as best as we can do education or in Brazil, and show who we are as a country. So this is a little bit of what I did from this time, and what Local Futures helped us to inspire here in Brazil. And my passion, as you guys know, is around community and education. And I will stop speaking now because I know there are some questions and I would love to chat, and I want to hear a lot on Kunzang as well. So thank you for the space.
Faiz, thank you so much for your wonderful, passionate speaking. That's such a gift, and for your work, which I know you have been doing very, very hard. Like you're a small team in Brazil, and you did so much. So thank you so much for your work. Now we'll pass to Kunzang. Kunzang is good, like I said before, I'm repeating myself again, but great friend of mine from Ladakh. She is also someone who similarly has left a kind of a more corporate-oriented, business-angled lifestyle vision in the city, and has returned to Ladakh, realizing the absolute importance of revitalizing the knowledge of the older people there in Ladakh, and building a young people's movement for genuine progress, as Kunzang says, genuine progress, as opposed to the top-down imposed idea of progress. So yeah, Kunzang's working with Local Futures and helping to strengthen specifically the young farmers movement in Ladakh. So Kunzang, thanks so much for joining us. So good to have you here.
Thank you. So Henry, please stop me in between if my internet fluctuates and if my voice is not clear, but I'll try my best to keep it up. So I started working with Local Futures in 2019 for Economics of Happiness that happened in Ladakh. And along with me, we have two other team members, Chuzin and Singhe. Both of them contribute similar to as much as I contribute. And we work as a team here. And it's quite inspiring to work with youngsters, young people who have the same ideology. So what happens in Ladakh, I'll just give you a background of how, what changed here in last 10 to 20 years. We had these farmlands where we could just walk, pick up apricots, apple while going to school. But then, the privatization of land started. People started building fences. And of course, like tourism boomed in past 10 to 20 years. And our local economy started depending on tourists so much that people started leaving agricultural land. Instead, they started building malls, hotels for tourists. And I think for us, because we study here till secondary school, and because we don't have colleges, we did not have any option apart from going to Delhi, Chandigarh. Those are the cities in India where we can go and get our college education. So there, because we are staying in a city, we have an ideology. We get everything from outside, a packed food, a food that we eat is from there, like from central Indian food that we eat. So we have been doing that for 15 years. And when we come back, it's kind of hard for us to balance what we used to do when we were a kid here, and then what we have learned when we are a youngster and when we started working. So it was interesting for me to meet Singhe and Chuzin with the same ideology, wherein they want to work for money. They wanted to work for money, but corporate structure is not actually making sense to us. Like, it might be giving us money every month, but where is the mental satisfaction of what you want to do here? But saying that, we are not there yet. It is not as Korea or like Brazil, that everything has changed. There are no malls, cinema halls yet, but it is going to be there soon, unless we push this movement and we spread more awareness amongst ourselves too. Like, even me, I find it difficult for me to make my family understand that we are eating this packaged food, which is spoiling our health first, then the environment, and then it's impacting our culture and tradition that we used to have. And I mean, it's still a work in progress. So I see that we are still moving towards this huge change towards modernization, globalization, where we want more. People want more because we have stayed outside Ladakh, and we have done that. So we want the same entertainment factors here as well. So it's quite interesting. I mean, it's it's inspiring too that we are not being part of what everyone want to do, and I'm thankful to be part of Local Future. Per se, that I'm learning so much from both of you as well. I think um, yesterday we met one of our local authorities from the government who makes government policies, and we were just discussing the bridge that we have between the consumers and the producers. I was just trying to tell them the huge gap that we have. 70% of urban migration, people who have migrated from villages here in Leh, they are the consumers. 70% is the consumer and 30% of people are the producer, which is reducing in number every year, because we want to be dependent on shops, industrialization, uh, all these things. We have to see the grassroots level problem, and then I was suggesting to make policies according to that, like three of us, and then another guy who is a scholar doctor, he was there too, suggesting couple of awareness programs that we can initiate in Ladakh, starting with maybe even schools for that matter. I was quite inspired by Theas that if you're using ecological maybe practices in a university, even schools can have these small farms, small kitchen gardens where they can actually learn and see how things grows from seed. And then maybe I'm jumping from one topic to another, but in our last event we also talked about organic seeds, which we still have time to preserve our organic seeds which are not hybrid yet, because like government want Ladakh to be an organic state. But if we are not using an organic seed, how are we going to produce an organic food? So all these discussions, there's big change happening, because recently Ladakh it was a region under Jammu and Kashmir, which is another state, but now it is a different union territory. So we are getting a lot of attention from central government of India in terms of per se development, the progress. They want to build roads, dams, highest geothermal project is going to be built in Ladakh, and a lot of investments, a lot of changes we are going through, wherein we have to just find the balance of uh, how we can preserve our culture and tradition, at the same time will not block the opportunities from of future. Yeah, so
Yeah, thank you, Kunzang. Thanks so much for adding all of that, for speaking from the heart and from your experience. So important. I think that last point about future, about redefining what progress means, is so important, not only on a personal level, or maybe, yeah, not only on a personal level, but also on the societal level, as each of us have gone through a process of eschewing old ideas of what it means to be successful, what it means to strive for success and glamour in an urban-centric consumer system. At the same time, as we undergo that process, it's a similar process at the societal level. We have to eschew what the ideas of progress and development and high tech and geothermal this and this infrastructure project and all of these technologically fueled kind of global corporate led future visions, and not only visions but actual structures that are being imposed on us, these really need to be put aside. We really need to, because we can't keep growing growing in that conventional term. We can't keep growing like this for the sake of the planet, for the sake of humanity. We are growing up in a time where we are seeing these problems only get worse, even as they talk at the higher levels about carbon and about, capitalism 2.0 or whatever. We have the lived experience that as these conversations go on, these problems are only getting worse because they're not rethinking the fundamentals of what the future looks like. And I think there's growing among the youth, among young people of all different kinds, not only activists, not only environmentalists, there's growing awareness, or at least intuitive rising, that we're not, that happiness doesn't come through materialism and consumerism. Happiness comes through connections to other people, to connections to nature, to connection to meaningful work. And that is another thing that young people are being robbed of in this system, is meaningful work or work at all. It's so much more difficult to find stable employment. And so these lies are being seen for what they are, at least on the intuitive level, I'd say. But increasingly, this is the job, I think, of the localization movement, is to name the reasons for these problems and to name a cohesive systemic alternative. And for us, that cohesive systemic alternative looks like stronger local economies that are embedded in their place, that have dialogue between individual people, between the community, but also dialogue between the community and the natural world, so that we're informing one another, so that we're creating a level of prosperity and wealth and comfort, but in a way that is not sacrificing the needs of the planet and the needs of other people. We know that's what this system is doing. It's sacrificing the long term for the short term, sacrificing the deep and the profound for the superficial and the vain. And we're over that. We're just over that. So it's so good to be sitting here with three people from, well, and not just three, I'm sure many of you who are watching are also in this group of people who are doing that work of challenging that system and rethinking and renewing and resisting. These are words we use at Local Futures. Rethink, resist, and renew. And that process is best done in community. It's best done when we have, like Kunzang was saying, so good to meet Chozin and Singe and to be able to work with them. I really appreciate that. It's so important to have a community of other people, like-minded people around you, who you can strengthen these ideas with and strengthen these intuitive yearnings with, so that it's not just something that happens internally, but something that you're manifesting in your reality by even just having conversations and by hearing reflections, by realizing that other people are feeling this too, that other people feel the emptiness of consumer capitalism, that other people yearn to reconnect to nature, and to each other. And something I was speaking about with GoWoon when we first met over Zoom, was the importance of learning to be vulnerable, the importance of communicating in a more vulnerable way with each other, because because the movement is not going to be built on an idea of, this is my idea and this is what I want to communicate and this is how the world must change because I'm insecure, my insecure ego is attached to this idea. There's so much insecurity that we have to shed before we can genuinely be honest with each other and genuinely interrogate the shared roots of our personal, social, and planetary problems. So we need to do that. We need to, for the movement to build, we need to have those smaller circles of sharing. I like to think of those as like the mycelia of the movement, where you know, the underground network of fungal, you know, in the forest, you've got all the fungus underground that is communicating between the trees. And that is what we've got to build up, that grassroots awareness, because there's the fuel for it is there. The need for change is there. The desire for change is there. I'm seeing more and more conversation among young people about rejecting capitalism and about realizing the value of indigenous knowledge. So the desire is there, and it has to come out through those circles. So I encourage anyone who's here to form one of those circles with like-minded others. Obviously, it doesn't have to just be young people. It should be intergenerational, to have these conversations and strengthen the awareness through which, as Kunzang was pointing to, as Thijs was pointing to, as GoWoon was pointing to, these projects, renewal projects and resistance or even structural level policy change projects can become realities. So this is my hope for the future. Thank you all for sharing. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I'd now very much like to open it up to questions from the audience. And maybe Laura, I'm going to ask Laura to ask the question. So Laura is a dear friend of mine, and she works with us at Local Futures. So I'm just going to invite her onto the screen to ask some questions of us. She's also sprightly and young.
Hopefully you can see me. It's a bit dark in here. Yeah, we've got lots of amazing questions in here. I'm going to go back to the first one from Rakesh, which is, what advice would you give to a young person wanting to start a career in this field? I'm about to graduate from a university in the UK, and I'm finding it difficult to find organizations like these.
Well, unless anyone else wants to go first, I'd ask GoWoon, because she's maybe.
Please go ahead first. Please go ahead.
Oh, no. I wasn't one of you. Thijs?
Okay, I think it has to be fun at the same time. So I think I strongly recommend to find your own interest and match that interest with, sustainability goals, I guess. And there are lots of co-ops in this days that actually people gather together and share their ideas and, build similar ideologies. So, yeah, that's pretty much that I want to give as tips.
What I would like to say is that I will answer your question, just give me some context. I think we are missing a lot for young people, social imagination of our future. Our way of imagining our future is much like technological movies, that either it's apocalypse, everything is going to die, everyone's going to die, and it's going to be that, or it's super technological, like I don't know, planes, cars flying, and technology within our bodies, and Westworld, and machine over human. Okay, so where is the social imagination of us being connected to nature, us having communities within forests, within food systems, within agroforestry systems? So I think we're missing pictures and imagination of what this different future would be. And there's a very cool movement that Rob Hopkins is doing. It's called What If? And it's just asking questions like, what if we did this? What if we did that? And we can't say, no, this is a bad idea. We just can grow upon the idea. So what if we moved to the countryside and started growing our own rice? What if we do that? So it's the idea of changing social imagination. And in Brazil, we say decolonizing our imagination. Stop thinking that industrialization is the only way to go and technology is the only way to go. There are other ways of living that it's going to make us maybe even more happy. And sometimes when looking for a job, there's a lack of imagination as well, because we only think that we can work for a corporation and for an amount of a salary or an organization. And sometimes we can work for ourselves within the movement. and so many people have different types of ways of working their lives. So what I want to say is that sometimes when I say it for myself, like the experiences, I'm someone privileged here in Brazil. I had access to higher education. I graduated from university, and the modern story of success is that I should find a job and someone should hire me. And this is not the only story. You can imagine something different. You can fund the project. You can find other people that, and answering this other question that tells like, how can I start a localization movement in my own area? Just by finding people who have the same interests as you. It can be in Instagram. It can be in Facebook. It can be your neighbor. There's so many people around the world who are waking up for ecological issues and are wanting to understand that globalization and technology maybe and development is not the answer, and we have other things that we want to care about. And if you have 3 people, it's enough. We did an event here in Brazil with over 40 people speaking, and over 4 days with 3 people, and we weaved this community and movement just by calling people around, finding people in the internet, and just showing our vision of the future and what the things that we really cared about, just speaking from the heart. And there were so many people interested in being like, yeah, I believe in what you believe, let me help you. So when finding a job or co-creating a movement, please let's imagine different ways, getting together with different people. So I talk about Schumacher College for Rishi because he's in the UK, because they're doing a little bit of lots of that, but they're uniting people from all around the world to rethink. So, and there are these types of organizations all around the world. There are eco-villages all around Europe and all around the world who are showing a different way of living. And GoWoon has shown us such a different way of living that it's so beautiful and so connected. So I would advise you to find people around the world who are doing this project, and maybe just go visit them or talk to them and get inspired. Because maybe work is not finding a job. Maybe work is understanding where these movements are and living a simpler life and joining these types of movements, and maybe creating your own movement with other people that believe in this ecological future, in this different way of seeing what we can be in this world, and not as machines, but as actual beings within the ecosystem. So this is kind of radical, but it's my opinion.
Thanks so much, Thais. Kunzang, did you want to add to that? Or
No.
Cool.
Should we go on to the next question? Oh, sorry, Henry, do you want to go?
Yeah.
So I thought the next question could be from Ada, which is any tips on how I could start a localization movement in my own area? And Ada, maybe if you could add to the chat where you are, that might help the panelists.
Well, it's definitely, it's quite similar to the last question in that a lot of what Thais said definitely applies. You know, finding the people who are already doing it, and yeah, investing in those relationships as a beginning point. And it's also what I was talking about in terms of small circles of like-minded others that just start with the question. Actually, let's say start with the question, what can we do for our own well-being, and what can we do for the well-being of our community or the planet? Often those things become the same thing, right? So starting with a process of actually opening up and trying to be more vulnerable, I think, is really important. And then interrogating the system from a perspective that is, you know, wanting to rethink, wanting to, or feeling at least comfortable to start rethinking, and to, and from that, I think only from there can you build the relationships that are needed to sustain a renewal project, because it is hard. It is really hard to go against the system. You know, the whole point of what we're talking about in localization is that we have a globalizing system that is making food from the other side of the world artificially cheap. Its subsidies, its taxes, and its regulations are skewed away from giving us the time to be in community, away from giving us the resources to co-create something different from bottom up. Like, it is a very hard task. You're going against the grain. So, and obviously from World Localization Day, it's clear how many successful examples have managed to come about even despite those difficulties. But don't, you know, give yourself time and give yourself space and invest in relationships first. So rather than trying to do it alone. I think that's all I can really say to that. Someone else want to add something or moving on? Okay, we can move on.
Cool. Lara has a great question. What stories inspire and excite you about the change that is already happening in this space outside of what has already been talked about?
So what stories excite you? Sorry,
I'll read it again. What stories inspire and excite you about change that is already happening in this space outside of what has already been talked about?
Okay, cool, thank you. GoWoon, did you want to go? Yeah.
You know, I did my bachelor's degree in Canada, so I often hear, you know, stories from my friends in Canada. And before coming back to Korea about like 15 years ago, I saw this change, even though Vancouver was already a very famous for, you know, sustainability initiatives at the time. There was one piece of land downtown, and I thought, just like, you know, the case from Kunzang, I thought that there may be a big apartment or you know, some kind of building will be built up in that area, but you know, my thinking was wrong. People in the community converted it to community garden and started to plant trees and vegetables and flowers there. And I was just amazed by, you know, how people actually come together to the piece of land and started to, you know, open up their chatting and, you know, make more sustainable communities. And I often hear these kind of stories from, you know, all around the world, and that's what, you know, excites me the most.
Thank you. Kunzang, do you have any stories from Ladakh that you'd like to share, or any examples?
Yes, there are a couple of entrepreneurs actually who have studied outside, who had the opportunity to get a corporate job, earn a lot of money. But I'll name one of them. She was actually one of the panelists in the event that we organized. Her name is Sona Mahmood. So she actually studied agriculture, and then now she has started her own mushroom cultivation. She's the first producer of mushroom in Ladakh. I mean, and then after that, because she inspired such a lot of people, she in fact gave training to other people, in fact for free. Like she used to invite people, come over and learn how to grow mushroom. Now there are so many people who are getting into mushroom because they know that mushrooms that comes from outside are there are so many chemicals that they put on the mushroom just to make it look fresher. So yeah, I mean, she was inspiring. There's another guy who started a brand called Ladakh Basket, and now he's apart from supplying it to local people, he's actually selling the items online you can order it in Delhi also, all the dry fruits, dry apricots from Ladakh, some items. So I mean, I see change here. I see inspiring stories here too.
Thank you. I'm
Well,
actually go ahead.
I was just gonna share a few stories from Brazil. There is this movement in Uberlândia, which is the state here, that they're creating their own currency, their own money, which is called pollen, which is the pollinization process. So the little, I don't know how to say this in English, but the little, when bees and pollinizers exchange. So if you understand what I'm saying, so it's this exchange, the money as this exchange, this pollinizing, and they created this within the community. So it's a digital currency, and it can be used only for ecological and sustainable products. So all local stores can use it, and they keep the money flowing within ecological projects. So I think it's a very cool initiative. There's lots of projects on agroforestry here in Brazil. So if you guys don't know agroforestry, it's a different way of cultivating food, mimicking the forest, mimicking a tropical forest. And you have lots of farms here in Brazil on agroforestry, and lots of young people going back to the land and to farming because of agroforestry. So you have lots of education going around, so lots of summer courses, 5-day courses, 1-month courses that people run away from the city and they go to these courses. They fall in love with agriculture, and then they start their own agroforestry farms. And today we have more and more agroforestry farms as well, which is very inspiring. We have an artist here in Brazil called Mundano, that he wanted to make invisible people and what we call trash, right? Art. So in Brazil, we have these people who go around collecting trash from the streets within big cities with a very big cart, and they hold this cart around the city, and no one look at them. They're invisible. No one cares about trash. No one's speaking about recycling. So he started and he's very famous. So he started making this carts from this trash collectors as art canvas, as a place that he paints. So he started doing activist art within this, and then people started noticing, and then people started talking about this. So it was like calling attention with a beautiful piece of art and these things with very powerful messages for people to start looking into that. And there is also people working with government policies as well. So we have collective parties here in Brazil now, which was not a thing before. So many people running together, and many young people coming together. So like 4 or 5 people coming together and running to be elected together on topics around sustainability and climate change. So these are some inspiring stories of people coming together around sustainability and their local movement as well.
Cool, thank you. I just wanted to mention, I put in the chat the film that Kunzang and Chozin and Singye made, Young Farmers in Ladakh, and it features a few of those people like Sono Mangmo, that Kunzang talked about. And yes, great little film. I also I haven't put it in the chat, but maybe Laura can, to guide people towards Planet Local on the Local Futures website. It's just a library, an archive of amazing initiatives, concise little short stories from all around the world of all of these different projects, just so many. And we're in a very privileged position in Local Futures because we're connected to these movements around the world. All the time we're getting news about new initiatives and new groups of people making some radical changes and really inspiring grassroots projects in different communities. So we get that news every week, at least once a week kind of thing. So we want to share that with people, because we don't hear nearly enough about these stories in the mainstream media. And I don't know if it was maybe Lara Arnott who asked the question, and if it was, she'll already know the example that I'm about to share. But I'm very inspired. Something that really excites me is this idea that human beings can be an ecologically beneficial species. This is one of the big learnings from the localization movement and from ancient and traditional cultures. GoWoon researches this. Ladakh is a great example. Of course, there are many cultures in Brazil, and where I am in Australia, many cultural legacies that show that human beings can benefit the ecosystems in which they live. And so this I find such an inspiring idea, because we're told that the climate, we have 7 years until the climate crisis is too far gone. And this is such a reductionist scientific way of looking at it, as if these scientists know exactly what day or what point the Earth, they don't understand the Earth well enough to say that, to make that claim. And especially because they're only looking at it through a lens of this very monocultural lens of this is what human beings do. They destroy the planet, and they're not seeing all the potential in the localization movement that shows that we can actually draw down carbon, rebuild soils, produce more food, create habitat for wildlife, restore the water cycle, bring back the rain. As Thais was talking about, some of the agroforestry projects in Brazil have shown that you can cool the microclimate and increase rainfall in a region through succession-based agroforestry, like planting. And one of the great examples of this, just on a very small scale, but so inspiring, is in the northern rivers of New South Wales, the Hungry Earth project that I've had the privilege to just volunteer at a couple of times and visit. They're doing exactly that, and there are many other examples, but this is one that Local Futures is quite involved with in a way. And because they're bringing all of these, they're creating such a diversity of crops. It's all about diversity, and that's what localization is about, is diversity. As you shrink distance between producer and consumer, you're stimulating diversification on the land. And so in this project, they're growing 100 or more different food crops annually. And so many of those things we don't even find in the supermarkets in Australia, in our kind of very Eurocentric food system, supermarket food system that we have. These are plants that are things like cassava and plants that have come that we don't usually see here. The market that they're finding for those plants in Australia are immigrant communities, people who have come from the Pacific Islands. And of course, not the only market, but I've heard from them these beautiful stories about how those people who have migrated to Australia to find their own food being grown on this land has made them feel so much more at home. And that really touched me. That I felt that's such a beautiful example of the myriad benefits of these systems. Do we have
and I guess what you just said is related with what Howard wrote on the board. So,
what did he write?
He maybe Laura can help us read the question.
Sure.
And then, we can go over it.
Yeah, I can read it through. Let me just get it in front of me. A local class called Where To From Here concluded that in the future, the main task in life for individuals should be A, to find out who I am, B, develop a global consciousness towards other people, C, develop a global consciousness about the natural world. These should be our main drivers rather than merely do better economically and accumulate wealth, as we're currently obsessed with. Does this shift in goals fit in with your local economy?
Thank you. What a question. That's awesome.
I know. Well, that's also what Henny and I talked earlier last week. In my group, the first program that we provide to people when they join our community group is the communication program, so that they can actually realize who they are, and try to speak up as who they are, not to disguise themselves with some kind of social mask or different ideas, or the how they are trained or conditioned. Just be yourself. And I think it's not about finding who we are, it's about recovering who we are. We, in our DNA, just like Henry said, we are ecologically sustainably generated beings, in my opinion. And we need to just recover that DNA. And by just recovering that gene as a seed, we all are seed, right? We, what just Howard mentioned, A and B and C, just comes in one hand. I think they pretty much are the similar in the concept that to find out, to recover the identity of, what actual human being was supposed to be.
Yeah. And if I can just add to that quickly, to relate it to that idea of global consciousness, excuse me, we see in the localization movement, and just really not just the localization movement, but in the world, that the people who are able to be most expansive of heart and of worldview are those who are really secure, rooted where they are, place-based, have secure identities. And this is so important. Localization is about also rebuilding the connections between the individual and the community, and not seeing the individual as an isolated unit, obviously, but through localization, through reweaving the fabric of local interdependence, of actual economic reliance on one another, you become part of something larger than yourself in concentric circles, right? So once you reweave the fabric of local economies, that's a concentric circle. And there's also the family circle and the regional circle and the cultural circle. And then that global expansive consciousness comes through the local. It's kind of a beautiful paradox in a way. It's not done by diminishing the local, it's achieved through the local. And like GoWoon was saying, to become human again, to become who we really are is interdependent beings who are connected to each other. Humans are such a communal species. We are relying on one another, and we are ecological beings. So who we really are is our relationships with other people in the natural world. We can only recover that through recovering those relationships. So I believe that aligns completely with what the question was about. So thanks for such a good question.
I just would like to say that it's about a local economy is also about sharing this local wisdoms, and I see it as something very special with the world, right? So it's not about becoming isolated. As localization is not isolating yourself from the world, but it's sharing this cultural knowledge from the land. That it's different, as nature is different in different parts of the world, and even in one country, in Brazil, there are many different types of ecosystems here. And so we should be able to have different economies for different places, locally based. And we can share this with the world and respect this with the world. So when I see Kunzang saying that shopping centers are taking place there, and people are thinking that this technological developments are going to save, and young people are moving away from their traditions in Ladakh, this is one type of economy becoming greater of value over the local economy. And this is not what we want. We want diversity, as Henry said, of economies being able to express themselves and have equal space to be, to show what they are, and just to exist in different ways and be respected for that. So I think local economy is about the connections to ourselves, the connection to the economy, but also the connection to the planet.
Yeah, and that again, like the global is is achieved through the local. The concept of unity is achieved through diversity, you know, so there's diversity within unity. Kunzang, did you want to share from your experience or from Ladakh about that question?
Not really. You have already added, like, three of you have added such interesting things to it. I mean, I can only think of Zanskar Valley, which is so uninfluenced. Like last time when I traveled, they were not even using money. So think of a place which is not dependent on money right now as well. They're so self-sufficient. I could just think of that. Nothing more to add.
Cool, thank you. Shall we move to the next question then? How much time we have? Yeah, we have time for another question, at least. This is lovely. I love this. Thank you. So nice to be here.
Okay. Next question we have from Ilham. He says, unfortunately, what we see with the engineers in the agronomical field is that even though they have been educated to defend the biodiversity, they will convert to the agro-industrial field with chemicals just because they offer them better opportunities. So how to be able to get these young engineers to keep up with their first interest, which is defending the biodiversity?
It's a very tough question, and you know, it reminds me the concepts of complicated systems thinking versus complex systems thinking. So normally when we explain complicated system thinking, we borrow the term engineer's mind. So in a complicated world, you can expect the results. You know, in that complicated system world, 1 + 1 is word. It's like the sum of the parts is the system you get. So you can always expect the results. There is always certainties. But in real world, in real nature, you can never expect, you know, these definite outcomes, or you know, its complex system is full of uncertainties and, you know, chaos and everything, you know, you can ever imagine. So I think from the beginning of the education, we should be trained to have this complex system thinking mind so that we can actually understand how the nature works. So yeah, that's my answer to that.
Wow. I think the question is also getting at this idea that people who go in idealistically into a profession, wanting to make it better, wanting to make the world a better place, and regularly end up being co-opted by where the money is flowing and by, yeah, I mean, this is the tragedy of our times. It is such a tragedy that so many well-intentioned people are being even manipulated, even in a subconscious way, or even in a way that they don't quite see, into a profession that is contributing to the globalizing, destructive trajectory of the economy. And it's where the money is going. I mean, I don't know the example of engineering specifically that you're talking about, but I can bet you that the kind of projects that these engineers end up working on are projects that are the result of massive amounts of capital, corporate funds, and government funds, taxpayer money also going towards subsidizing huge projects that end up making a lot of money for very few people. But this money is coming out of the financial casino. It's not real money. It's money based on, again, on more of like a false idea about what the future is, about what investment should be. So investment wants to, all of this fake money that's been created is wanting to invest in a project that's going to create really high returns, but it's not actually creating genuine growth. But anyway, the point is that all of this money wants to invest in a very specific kind of project, and that specific kind of project is a high-tech, infrastructure-heavy. It comes back to GDP as well, because it's breaking us down. It's creating social and ecological breakdown, and that creates money exchange. So like the whole logic of this system is geared towards supporting these kind of destructive projects. And I think I don't have any answer to that. I mean, apart from we need to build a localization movement and we need to change the economy. But yeah, I think it is such a tragedy that so many well-intentioned people end up having to go into these jobs that are not what they really want to be doing.
Yes, I agree 100%. And here in Brazil, sorry for repeating myself, but I think this is the answer that we're finding is within agroforestry communities. Because most of the people who go to engineering school and agro school here in Brazil, they tend to get directed into big corporations and GMOs and these types of things. And they get very frustrated, and they end up in agroforestry communities. So I went for an agroforestry course in a community here in Brazil, in Brasilia. And I found there many frustrated agribusiness people saying that their job was to go around the country convincing farmers to use agrotoxics. And they didn't want to do this anymore, because every time they did this, they wanted to cry because they knew this wasn't good. So they were trying to change, but there was where the cars and the money and the luxury was. And they had to change this within themselves to be like, this is not what I want. I rather live a simpler life, which has much more value for me than this corporate luxury that they are offering me. But I'm actually selling my soul and the future of my planet and of my kids, and not actually gaining any wealth. It's just an illusion of wealth, of momentary wealth. And then coming back to agroforestry communities, and agroforestry is based on diversity and based on mimicking nature. And everything they built around food and the growing of food, around celebration, around community, again, that we are speaking, around bringing young people back to the land, having this intergenerational experience of celebrating the land, understanding nature, bringing people from different parts of Brazil and different parts of the world to exchange, so they don't feel that they are alone. I think these types of movements help people to connect with the land and to grow food in a different way. But I would like to ask Kunzang to tell how things are happening in Ladakh, because I know that there is a big movement for Ladakh to become organic, right? When I was there in the Economics of Happiness, they were talking about Ladakh being organic.
Yes. So I would say, I was just going to say that just use that knowledge and leave the corporate world and join localization movement. I mean, that's the solution I can think of. Like, and yeah, I mean, the administration, the local government might be planning on it. They have a huge propaganda that is being written. So it's so manipulating when you read it. But when you check the practical grounds, it is going to be very difficult, and we are part of it. Like, luckily, the current head of agriculture wants all the NGOs to be part of that movement. I mean, they want our suggestion, they want our involvement, they want, I don't know how practical and how effective it's going to be, but we are part of it. They are asking us for suggestions, they're asking us for initiatives, which I see as a very positive initiative from the administration side. So we are hoping for might not be organic, but at least self-sufficient that we were earlier. And then we can think of becoming more organic, like one step at a time, maybe.
Yeah, such a good point. And yeah, that, you know, the situation in the Ladakh is one that the local government has such restricted power to comparatively. You know, the central government still has, even more now, since is what I hear. Kunzang can say whether it's true, but even more power the central government has over Ladakh since the splitting off of Ladakh into a separate region. And that's really why we need economic localization, because in order to really revitalize bottom-up political democracy, you need that structure of decentralized, self-sufficient and interdependent local economic units, production for one's own need. That's genuine autonomy, and that's why for us economic localization is the most important step, more than that political. But anyway, just wanted to, we're done, we're over our time limit, so I just wanted to ask everyone, or the three of you, for a last word. And again, thank you so much for joining. It's been such a pleasure to be here with you three inspiring women.
It was my
I
great
would like-
pleasure. Yeah, please go ahead, Kunzang. No, please go ahead.
I just wanted to add to what I was talking about, that there are so many things which are changing here. So I just have one request to all the viewers, participants, all the listeners. When you talk about Ladakh, when you travel to Ladakh as well, come suggest people, tell people that this region is going through a vulnerable change. So I mean, just sharing your knowledge, what you shared right now to us, is, I think, a very important point that you can share with rest of India as well. Even Indian people need to understand that their culture, their region, the diversity is more important than going towards running after westernization, because that's the irony of the situation in this country right now. That's the last word, and that's the last request I have for all the viewers.
Thank you, Kunzang. Such an important point. Thank you.
It was my great pleasure just be sitting here and listening to what Thai's doing and Kunzang's doing, and what Henry is thinking about this great subject, and I learned a lot. And please visit me if you have chance to come to Korea. I will just walk you around the rural villages of Korea and show you these traditional ecological elements of Korea. So it was, yeah.
Oh God, I cannot wait. I'm so excited. I really
you.
hope. Nice.
Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for being in this energetic room with all these beautiful people. What I would say is I'm not gonna say it as this person said, but I'm just gonna give my interpretation of what he says. His name is Ailton Krenak, and he's an indigenous leader here in Brazil. And he says that when this micro revolution happens, which I think translates through this grassroots movement. So when the small revolutions happen, so you don't have to change everything in the world. You don't have to do something that changes the whole world. You just have to do something that changes your local, your place. And these micro revolutions give people who are what he says in these places like indigenous cultures, that hope that there are other people in the world who see the importance as well. So when we connect micro revolution with micro revolution with micro revolution, we see how beautiful this movement is globally, right? Because it is everywhere in the world. So don't feel alone. The start is very simple. Just connect with someone close to you. And this is the hope for an ecological future. So I would like to thank us all for doing this, for being present, for falling in love with the planet every day, and for giving themselves in service to connecting with nature and to localizing, to being part of this movement. And thank you so much, Henry and Local Futures, to make this possible for us from different parts of the world to be here connecting and sharing our ideas from the heart.
Thank you. That's the perfect note to end on. Thanks, guys. Thank you to everyone so much. please keep doing what you're doing to build the future that we need for the future, for our future. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye
Thank
bye.
you. Bye.
Bye bye.